Hello, everybody, and thank you all for joining this session today. So, my name is Lunga Zonke. I'm a solutions architect with AWS. I'm part of the enterprise solutions architecture team in South Africa, based in Johannesburg. We help a number of customers migrate their workloads into the AWS cloud, as well as modernize their workloads currently running on AWS cloud. So, today I'm going to share with you how you can accelerate your web and mobile application development with AWS Amplify. So I'll kick off this session with an overview of what Amplify is. Then I'll share how you can build those feature-rich applications with AWS Amplify. Then I'll touch on how you can build those backends with Amplify Studio, the Amplify CLI as well as the CDK. Then I'll touch on how to accelerate front-end development with Amplify Studio and Figma. I'll also touch on how to host those web applications. And then finally, I'll close out with a few customer references. So let's start by taking a look at some of the requirements of modern applications. So today's web and modern applications, they're expected to be available from anywhere in the world. So customers are looking to modernize applications in order to deliver the lowest latency possible to their end users globally. They're expected to scale to meet workloads, peak workloads, and spikes in traffic. They're expected to deliver applications on hundreds of different desktop browsers as well as mobile devices. Customers also want to continuously monitor applications to identify problems before they impact the customer experience. They also want to increase agility, innovate faster, and get to market faster. They want to be able to support modern application and front-end application frameworks. And they also want to avoid managing physical servers. They want to lower their total cost of ownership. And most importantly, they want to be able to build secure applications. So today's modern web applications as well as mobile applications, they look something like this. So they built with microservices to make applications easier to scale and faster to develop. This enables innovation, accelerates time to market, right? AWS has the broadest set of serverless technologies for compute, application integration, as well as orchestration. It also has purpose-built databases to enable this microservice architecture. From a front-end web development perspective, these modern web applications are typically developed using JavaScript. So it uses frameworks like React, Angular, Vue, or Next.js. And these JavaScript frameworks help developers build those scalable, dynamic applications faster. So these frameworks provide libraries that handle, common development tasks like cross-browser compatibility, routing, fetching data from microservice backends using API calls. From a static and server-side rendering perspective, these applications must also deliver the lowest latency possible. They must scale to meet peak workloads as well as spikes in traffic. They use static web hosting where HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are served with low latency from a content delivery network with points of presence across the globe. So typically, these applications need to be tested on browsers as well as real devices. And for that, we have a service called AWS Device Farm. This is an application testing service. So it allows you to test your web and mobile applications across an extensive range of desktop browsers and real mobile devices without having to provision or manage servers or manage any testing infrastructure for that matter. So these applications also need monitoring and observability. So AWS has a complete set of monitoring and observability tools to understand application health as well as identify a problem before they impact the customer experience. So we've got Amazon CloudWatch for monitoring, logging, alarming, and dashboarding. We've also got AWS X-Ray to analyze and debug production serverless web as well as your mobile applications. And lastly, these modern web applications need to have security, identity, and compliance. At AWS, security is our number one priority. So we provide services that help you protect your data, accounts, and workloads from any unauthorized access. So AWS Data Protection Services, they provide that encryption, key management, as well as threat detection, and they continuously monitor and protect your accounts as well as your workloads. So at AWS, we built AWS Amplify to make it easy for developers to build modern applications on AWS. So what is AWS Amplify? AWS Amplify is a set of purpose-built tools and features that lets front-end and full-stack web and mobile application developers to quickly build those feature-rich full-stack applications on AWS. So it gives developers that flexibility to leverage the breadth of AWS services as their use cases evolve. So with Amplify, developers can configure a web or mobile application backend. Then they can visually build a web or front-end UI and connect the two together. They can easily manage application content outside of the AWS console, and they're also able to ship faster and scale effortlessly without needing deep cloud expertise. So AWS Amplify, it really allows developers to build and manage modern web and mobile applications on AWS. So Amplify supports web frameworks like JavaScript, React, Angular, Vue, and Next.js. It also supports mobile platforms like Android, iOS, React Native, Ionic, as well as Flutter. So let's dive now a little bit deeper into the jobs that AWS Amplify enables front-end developers to perform. So Amplify is the fastest, easiest way to develop mobile applications, right? It has the Amplify toolbox, which provides support through the SDLC, right? So starting with the build phase, right? So you can build backend creation, you can create your application backends configurably in a fast and easy manner, even for users that are new to AWS. And when your backend is in place, you can seamlessly connect it to your front end. For delivering or shipping your application in just a few clicks, you can set up web deployments which host the static website and single web page applications or SPAs with the Git-based workflows. And then for managing application production, you can easily manage your application users as well as the content using the AWS Amplify console. So Amplify allows you to get to market faster. So most teams want to launch the application. They want to launch as quickly as possible, right? So Amplify leverages your existing skill set to develop the Android, iOS, or web applications, right, with those use case-centric features as well as seamless IDE integration. It also streamlines your workflow with powerful CLI toolchain, Git-based deployment, open source client libraries which provide those use case-centric and easy-to-use interfaces. This enables mobile and web application developers to easily interact with their application backends. It also streamlines your workflow with data modeling, which accelerates building the application backend. Also, with UI component libraries that accelerate front-end development and connecting UI components to the application backend. Amplify Studio is a visual UI component builder with front-end code generation tools. And lastly, with the Amplify or the AWS global infrastructure, you can deliver your applications to users anywhere in the world with low latency. So AWS Amplify is a set of purpose-built tools and features that allow front-end and full-stack developers to build and host those feature-rich applications. So it's important to note that while you can use all of these services and tools in Amplify, it's not a requirement. So these tools and services can be used a la carte or like Lego blocks, right? So for an example, we have many customers that use Amplify hosting to host their front-end application, and then they use an existing backend. So they'll connect that application to an existing backend. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the tools and services that come with AWS Amplify. The first one is the Amplify libraries. So this is a purpose-built tools interacting with AWS services. So these libraries are powered by AWS Cloud and offer that pluggable model which can be extended to use other providers. So these libraries can be used with both new backends created using the AWS Amplify CLI, or they can be connected with an existing backend. Right. So things like adding features like sign up, sign in, API calls, local storage, if you want that offline usage, or if you want to add real-time interactive experiences, or if you want to add location-aware content. The other one is the command line interface or the CLI. And this is a tool chain to configure and maintain your application backend from your local desktop. So you can configure cloud functionality using the CLI's interactive workflow for intuitive use cases such as authentication, storage, as well as your API calls. You can also test these features locally and deploy to multiple environments, right? So all configured resources are available to customers as infrastructure and code templates, right? And this enables a better team collaboration and ease integration with Amplify's CI/CD workflow, right? Next, we have AWS Amplify Studio, which really serves two main purposes. The first one is that it provides a visual backend builder for developers that prefer to set up their application backend in a UI instead of using a CLI. Secondly, Amplify Studio is a visual development environment that allows developers to create those React UI components without any coding, right? While still allowing them to customize the design, as well as the behavior of their components using code. So let's take a closer look then at the develop state or the build state. And in just a few moments, I'm going to touch on how customers are using this, right? But both the UI and Amplify CLI have intuitive workflows to set up scalable AWS backends with authentication, storage, data, and other common use cases, right? Once you have your application backend in place, you can then connect it to your front end, right? So we'll be using amplifier libraries, which are actually built on top of the lower level AWS SDKs and work with popular web frameworks and native platforms to facilitate connecting, web, Android, and iOS apps to your application backend resources. You can do all this without requiring years of experience and deep understanding of how these different AWS services work. So Amplify comes with a number of different feature categories, and what's unique about this is that they're all oriented around your application's use case than, as opposed to being centered around the underlying AWS services. So for an example, authentication is backed by Amazon Cognito and lets you create those onboarding flows with fully managed user directory and pre-built sign up, sign in, forgotten password, and multi-factor authentication workflows. So the data store is an on-device persistent storage engine that automatically synchronizes data between your applications as well as the AWS cloud and is powered by GraphQL. Then there's also the analytics feature. So the analytics feature category allows you to understand how your users are behaving. So we can use auto tracking to track your user sessions and web page metrics. So the interaction lets us build that interactive conversational bots with the same deep learning technologies that power up Amazon Alexa with just a single line of code. Right? So these feature categories are all backed by AWS services, but the programming experience has been abstracted to a higher level. AWS Amplify, I mentioned it supports a wide range of mobile and web frameworks. Right? So it provides libraries and UI components for Android and iOS. It works with JavaScript frameworks like React, Angular, Vue, React Native. It also supports Flutter, which is an application SDK for building high performance and high fidelity apps for iOS, Android, and web, and it uses the Dart language. So let's take a look then a little bit about how to build those application backends with AWS Amplify. There are three major ways you can build your application backend. The first one is using the Amplify Studio. So this is a visual interface that allows you to easily build and ship, complete web or mobile application in hours. You can also use the Amplify CLI, which is a unified tool chain to create or integrate as well as manage the AWS cloud services for your application. And lastly, you can use the CLI. So the CLI provides that ability to add custom AWS resources with the AWS Cloud Development Kit or the CDK. So Amplify Studio provides a web-based visual interface that lets developers configure and maintain the application as well as create front-end UI outside of the management console. Right? So with the Studio, you can convert designs built in Figma to become reusable React components that you can then customize via code. So Amplify Studio allows you to visually build that scalable backend for your application. You can extend this backend with AWS services that are not available within the Amplify Studio using the AWS CDK. So Studio helps developers automate their front-end UI development, saving them from having to write thousands of lines of code and allowing them to focus on the business logic and building an enhanced application experience. Right? All backend resources created by Studio are usable with the Amplify CLI. So developers can also configure a new or existing application backends in just a few clicks with the Studio or Amplify Studio. So from the Amplify Studio development environment, developers can quickly set up data, authentication, and storage amongst others, and they can also use the CLI toolchain to add more capabilities to their application. They can add team members to Studio to manage application data, files, user groups, and they can do this outside of the AWS management console. They can also extend, with the Amplify CLI toolchain to add functions and access the breadth and depth of AWS services. So one of the main benefits of the CLI is that, it gives you that ability to transform the schema definition to a GraphQL API, running in AWS AppSync and interacting with database like DynamoDB. So this tool chain generates hundreds of lines of boilerplate API resolver code, as well as the client-side code that developers would then have to hand code without the Amplify CLI. So if you want to make a change to your data structure, it's not a problem at all. So all you need to do is update the schema definition and then let Amplify generate the server side as well as the client side code. So with Amplify CLI, developers can model data and relationships in GraphQL schema. They can also set up authentication and authorization and others. And then, as mentioned previously, Amplify CLI transforms that schema to GraphQL API and is powered by AWS AppSync as well as DynamoDB. So development teams can scale their applications and grow their businesses on AWS as their requirements evolve. By scaling, we mean they can extend their applications beyond their core Amplify use cases, leveraging the full breadth and depth of AWS services. They can also support, horizontal scaling, right? So they can be able to support the user growth of your web application as well as your mobile application by providing a secure, reliable, highly performant cloud service at scale. And lastly, developers can support the internal DevOps practices as well as their tooling. So AWS Amplify's extensibility feature gives developers that flexibility to customize their AWS backend and deployment capabilities. So you can reconfigure Amplify generated backend resources to optimize for specific use cases or modify Amplify's deployment operations to comply with your enterprise DevOps guidelines as your needs evolve. Now, let's dive into how you can accelerate front end with Amplify Studio and as well as Figma. So Amplify Studio extends the capability of Amplify that lets developers create that front-end UI visually. So developers can go from a Figma design to a full-stack React application in just a few hours instead of days or even weeks. So Studio comes with dozens of popular React components such as buttons, forms, marketing templates, so developers can select and customize them to fit their style guide. Alternatively, developers who are working with UI UX designers, they can import UX designs from the popular design prototyping tool called Figma. They can import these designs as clean React code for the seamless collaboration between designers and UI developers. So Studio will import all these UI and infrastructure artifacts as code so you can maintain full control over your application design as well as its behavior. So this tool helps facilitate the designer and developer workflow, providing more seamless collaboration between designers and developers. So Amplify Studio's UI builder is an open source design system, right? So it has cloud connected components and primitives that simplify, building accessible, performant, and beautiful applications in React, Angular, and Vue. You can also use Flutter, just to name a few. So these cloud connected components include news feeds, photo grids, search boxes, user registrations, things like navigation bars and footers. Marketing and primitive components include components such as calls to action buttons, include menu, hero, features, pricing, as well as testimonials. So these help developers create consistency and build complete applications that fit their brand. So in addition to selecting from a library of pre-designed components, developers working with UX designers can import designs. They can import these UI components directly from Figma. So Studio automatically converts this, as I mentioned, to clean React code, saving you from having to author thousands of lines of code. So this helps improve the developer workflow between designers and developers. So once the UI and backend are built, they are connected, you can then deploy directly from Amplify Studio. You can deploy and host with Amplify hosting if you're building a web application. So you can also use Studio with Amplify hosting to deploy or host any React app, Vue, or Next.js app with built-in CI/CD flows. So like Amplify Studio lets you test your changes in pre-production environments before pushing your application changes to production. All right, so let's talk now about AWS Amplify hosting. So modern web applications are hosted with a content delivery network. So that architectural style that was common a few years ago, where web applications were hosted on web servers, or maybe running in containers or running on an EC2 instance behind load balancers. Then the front a multi-tiered architecture deployed in multiple AWS regions and availability zones. That architecture style is no longer required. Modern web applications use hosting approach now where static files like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are served with low latency from a content delivery network with points of presence globally. So this helps you deliver the lowest latency possible to your end users globally and scale to meet peak workloads as well as spikes in traffic. So Amplify Hosting is a managed CI/CD hosting service for modern web applications with hundreds of points of presence globally. So this allows for that fast, secure, reliable, static server-side rendered apps that scale with your business. Continuous development allows you to deploy updates to your web application on every code commit to your Git repository. So the app is deployed and hosted, using Amazon CloudFront, which is AWS's CDN. And we also have global web hosting with AWS Amplify. Right? So this is a service for building, deploying, and hosting scalable web apps with serverless backends. So it's great for things like if you want to do blogs or static web apps, serverless web applications where you can add dynamic functionality using something like GraphQL or REST APIs, or building your progressive web apps, which is a website that looks and behaves as if it were a mobile application. So these progressive web applications, they offer native application-like performance. They can work offline, support push notifications, and can be updated. Right. So some of the key features of Amplify hosting include global availability. So you can host these websites and static web applications, using Amazon CloudFront, which is a content delivery with hundreds of points of presence globally. You can use easy custom domains, so you can connect a custom domain with painless verification. You can use redirects and custom headers. So these allow you to easily configure your hosted site with redirects, rewrites, and custom headers. You can also use it with for simplified continuous workflow, right? So it has built-in CI/CD workflows, which can help accelerate your application release cycle. And lastly, there's also a monitoring feature, and this monitoring metrics, or you can get monitoring metrics for your application near real time, and here you can create those custom alarms that send notifications, when a metric exceeds a threshold that you set. All right, so I'm going to now close this session off with just taking a look at Amplify's customers, so those customer references. So the global streaming music platform, Amazon Music, it uses AWS Amplify and AWS AppSync to enable users to sync their music playlists and access it offline from their web or mobile applications. So they use Amplify's extensibility features to customize their application backend, leveraging CloudFormation, as well as the CDK or Cloud Development Kit, while supporting the internal deployment practices. There's also Hypertrack, which is a managed service for live location tracking. This is a quote from Hypertrack, right? And I quote, "Developers across industries and countries build location-aware applications with Hypertrack and count on us to power real-time experiences." Right? So Amplify and AppSync are a core part of streaming hundreds of millions of live location events between applications in real time. So both Amplify and AppSync accelerated time to market for Hypertrack and saved us a lot of engineering effort. Thank you so very much for joining. I hope you enjoyed this section. Thank you.